DraftKings contributor, Matt Meiselman, RotoWire's Erik Halterman. We are price checking, boys. So your favorite plays at the following price ranges for tonight's 14-game Major League Baseball slate. Pitcher over 8K. Matt, who's your dude?
So mine's Zack Wheeler. I think there are a lot of good choices on this slate. Maybe the last couple of times I've been on, we've had some pretty gross pitching slates. This isn't one of them. There are a lot of guys to pick from: Freddie Peralta, Lucas Giolito. And I think Wheeler is the best choice here. Part of it is I think he'll be a little bit lower owned in tournaments than some of these other guys, Garrett Cole included, because I think there's a perception that the Braves still have a good offense. But without Ronald Acuna, and Jock Peterson is a fine hitter, but after the top few guys in this Braves lineup, there's a massive, massive drop off to the point where like Matt Moore almost put together a decent game against them last night. Dansby Swanson kind of ended his hopes. But even so, the back half of the Braves batting order is really awful right now. And they have a pitcher in the lineup also, with this being in the National League. So I think it's actually a really strong matchup for Wheeler. And we don't have to get into how good of a pitcher he is. He's just been great across the board for the whole season, goes deep in games, all of that. So I think the undervalued matchup to some extent is why I like Wheeler the most for tournaments.
Okay, Erik, do you agree? A lot of good choices?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of really good pitchers who are accurately priced above 8,000, but most of them have either a tough lineup or a tough park to deal with. So there's, arguments against almost all of them. And that applies to my guy too, Tyler Mahle at 9,300. Tough park in Cincinnati, but he's facing a righty-heavy Cardinals lineup that ranks 24th by WRC Plus on the season. So I think that's enough to make up for that difficult environment he's pitching in. And I'm fully on board as Mahle being, not quite an ace, but a second-tier pitcher. I think he's very much legitimate frontline starter. He showed hints of that last year by striking out 29.9% of opposing batters, but he had a shockingly low ground ball rate, below 30%. Anytime you see a ground ball rate starting with a 2, that's a worry, especially in a park like the Reds have, where balls leave it more than almost anywhere in the league. This year, he's got the ground ball rate pretty much at league average, and hasn't lost any of his strikeout rate. He lost 0.3%. And so when you strike out that many guys and have no weaknesses anywhere else, that's frontline starter stuff. He struck out 6 or more batters in 9 straight starts. So he's very safe bet to give you a high total in that category. He did give up 5 earned runs his last time out, but that it was his second start in a row against the Brewers. So I'm not too worried about that. I think he's a very safe option given the weak Cardinals offense and how likely he is to strike out a high number of batters.
All right, E. Well, hook me up, please, with the pitcher under 8K.
Yeah, I'm going to go just under 8,000. At 7,900, I like Alex Cobb quite a lot. If you think Alex Cobb as this boring but fine starter who doesn't strike many guys out but keeps a decent enough ERA, that is somehow not who Alex Cobb is anymore at age 33, despite not really making big changes to his pitch mix or anything like that. He's got a 3.96 ERA on the season, but that's over a run worse than his FIP, which is all the way down at 266, because suddenly he strikes people out. That 26.2% strikeout rate is a career high, and he's kept that very high ground ball rate that he's always had, 54.9%. He's only allowed 1 or fewer earned runs in 4 of his last 5 starts, and I think he could continue that run here against the Twins, who normally have a good offense, but losing Nelson Cruz in a trade to the Rays is going to be a big blow to any lineup. So if a lot of people don't realize that Alex Cobb is maybe actually good now in his mid-30s, I think he's definitely a buying opportunity.
Okay, Matty, what about you, man? Pitcher under 8K.
I'm not sure how excited I am about this pick yet, but it could potentially be my favorite of the slate by far. So the Dodgers are trying to stretch out David Price to be a full-time starter with Trevor Bauer away from the team, Clayton Kershaw on the IL. And David Price is only 6,300, and he's getting the Rockies away from Coors Field in a home game in LA. Anytime you face the Rockies not at Coors, sometimes even in Coors, I mean, it's just not a good offense. So you can't really ask for a better matchup than this. And Price is a good pitcher. So the concern here is just how long will he pitch for? His last appearance was against this same Rockies team. He was at Coors Field and went 4 innings, gave up 1 run. He's faced 15 total batters in each of his last 2 appearances. Both were starts. And the Dodgers have said they want him to be a starter now. So maybe he gets capped at 5 innings, maybe it's 6. I don't think he's going 7 or 8 by any stretch, maybe at some point later in the year, but this is a solid pitcher who's really cheap and in a really good matchup. And the ownership may not get there because of the concern of just how long he'll pitch for. So if people aren't getting here, I feel like he's the best pitching play on the slate because the cost is just so much lower than it should be if he's actually a starting pitcher.
Yeah, well, let's talk about guys who swing the wood here, dude. Hitter over 5K. Matt, who do you want to spend some cash on?
So there's a little bit of a theme for me today. I think the Tigers are just generally really overvalued, and that includes their pitcher, Willie Peralta. So I like the Royals guys a lot, particularly Sal Perez, Whit Merrifield. I think that there's a perception that the Tigers are a lot better than they are with the winning streak. So those are two guys I'm interested in. But I feel like I have to mention this. Erik talked about Tyler Mahle, and I actually don't disagree with anything he said there. But the thing about Mahle and then also the park that he pitches in, there's a lot of variance potentially. So you could have a ton of strikeouts. Mahle could strike out 12 guys. Wouldn't shock me at all. But I also think there's potential for a bunch of home runs. And Arenado and Goldschmidt are just not guys that anyone's going to pay up for in the mid 5,000s. So the Cardinals are actually a stack I'm looking at, those two guys in particular. And honestly, I feel like you could play Mahle in some lineups and stack the Cardinals in other lineups because in Cincinnati, you see tons of home runs. You actually see tons of strikeouts. Just the nature of the park, for whatever reason, produces a lot of both. And Mahle is a pitcher who does a lot of both. So this is a game that could end up anywhere. And I feel like the Cardinals could score 0 runs. They could score 15 runs. So I'm looking to their expensive guys along with the Royals' expensive guys.
All right, Erik, expensive batter you like.
Yeah, there's a guy who isn't expensive enough, and I try to not recommend the same guy too often in a short span, but I got to throw out Juan Soto again. Last time I recommended him here, he hit 2 homers. We'll see if he can manage that again. He's priced as merely one of the good hitters at 5,600, tied for the 11th most expensive hitter on the slate. But I think he is the best hitter, or top 2 or 3. According to most of the projection systems, I looked at Zips, the Bat, and Steamer. He's second in OPS according to Zips and the Bat, and top projected OPS the rest of the season according to Steamer. So this guy is still, despite what you might call a disappointing first half, he's still projected to be the best hitter in the league down the stretch. And that disappointing number so far has him hitting 302 with an on base of 424 and slugging 508. He has more walks than homers. He is hitting the ball on the ground a bit too much. 54.5% ground ball rate is a career high. But he joked about the home run derby fixing his swing and getting him to hit it in the air more. And it seems like that's happening. He's already homered 5 times in 6 games since the break and is hitting 522 with a WRC plus of 364 since that home run derby. He's the best hitter in the league for me, and he'll get the platoon advantage against Jorge Lopez at Camden Yards. Lopez with an ERA north of 6. So maybe the whole world will be on him, but I want to be part of that group as well.
Well, what about a hitter under 5K, Erik?
Yeah, I'm going back to Cincinnati and going to go with Aristides Aquino at 2,900. Hasn't had much playing time this year, but he's got the opportunity for some starts with Nick Castellanos' broken wrist. People remember Aquino for his 14 homers in that incredible month of August as a rookie back in 2019. He really just hadn't done anything in that September and all of last year. He didn't play all that much and hit just 188 over that stretch. But in a small sample of just 67 plate appearances this season, he's striking out a ton, over 35% of the time, but has an incredible 27.3% barrel rate. Obviously, some small sample stuff at play there, but we know he has huge power. 6 homers in 67 plate appearances is 54 homer pace if he came to the plate 600 times. So he's got the potential to knock one out along with the best in the league. And he's priced this cheap because, again, hasn't played that much and does strike out a lot. But with the platoon advantage against Wade LeBlanc, whose 4.31 ERA is at least a run better than pretty much all the ERA estimators. Again, in Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati, LeBlanc doesn't get whiffs, just a 13.4% strikeout rate, and he doesn't keep the ball on the ground, 38.9% ground ball rate there. So it's pretty much the ideal matchup, and Aquino, again, might strike out multiple times, but also might clear the fence multiple times.
Matt, what say you?
So I'm looking to the same two teams I already mentioned. Tyler O'Neill, Yadier Molina are priced in the high 3,000s. I like both of them if you're stacking the Cardinals, but O'Neill's home run upside on a slate where probably very few people will have him, I think that's really appealing. And then on this Royals team, Jorge Soler is 2,800. Then you can pay up a little more for Andrew Benintendi, 4,100. I don't think anyone gets to Carlos Santana for their first base slot at 4,900. So I just really like the Royals a lot for this slate. If you're playing cash games, though, I think the safest bet for his price is Justin Upton against Jay Happ, 3,300. The platoon split is favorable. It's obviously a good matchup. Happ has been known to blow up pretty often, actually. But Upton just came back off the IL, so the price is still a lot lower than it otherwise would be. He'd probably be in the 4,000s if he'd been in the lineup for more games, but he just came back yesterday. So he's just underpriced for that reason. I think he's probably the best cash play in the outfield for this slate.